So hello my friends, Devaun Lennox here, PhotographyPX. In today's video I want to answer whether the Fujifilm X-T200, which I have right here, is the ultimate beginner's camera at this price point. And in short, that answer is going to be maybe. There are some excellent competitors at this particular price point offering somewhat similar features, so it's going to really be dependent on what you find important as a beginner's camera. But the Fujifilm X-T200 is an excellent beginner's camera. In the description box down below, you'll see timestamps when I'm going to cover specific topics that we're going to cover over the course of this video. I will be giving you guys a detailed guide and walkthrough on the factors that we at PhotographyPX consider important in assessing beginners' cameras. And we'll also cover some of the factors that you may want to consider along your journey. And then we'll also assess how the Fujifilm X-T200 measures and scores across all of those markers and standards. You can find that in the description box down below if you want to skip that particular section and just go right to our verdict of the X-T200. With that out of the way, let's go into how we define a beginner's camera and what are the most important factors when considering a beginner's oriented camera. First and foremost, it's going to be image quality and the quality of the photos the camera captures. That is going to be the most important and paramount decision-making process. Ideally, you want a camera that captures higher quality images than the smartphone that you already have. And it's very likely if you have a smartphone that's a flagship in 2021, that smartphone is actually incredibly capable as is. So if you're going to be upgrading to a dedicated camera, the reasons that you want to do that is because you want an upgrade in image quality. So a beginner's camera needs to provide a better, higher resolution sensor that captures more depth of field, that has more detail, and that allows the photo that it captures to lend itself well to post-processing, editing, and sharing online, or printing if you want to be printing your photos. Ultimately, that is the most important factor in a beginner's camera. Everything else that I'm going to talk about following this point is really a bonus. It is important. I'm not going to say it's not important. It's very important, but it is ultimately a bonus because you want to upgrade, because you want better images than what your smartphone can provide. The second and most important thing from image quality is going to be ease of use and how easy is the camera to use and capture great images. Ultimately, if you're a beginner, you already have a smartphone that can capture decent images and maybe excellent images if you have a flagship. So it's already easy enough to do that. You just point your smartphone and you just press the photo, the shutter release, and you capture an image. The camera that you're looking at has to be able to replicate that in some fashion. And that's going to be an ultimate determining quality if whether you pick up photography long-term as a long-term hobby or you become a semi-professional or professional photographer, is going to be your experience with taking photos with the camera. If the camera is overly complicated, it's bulky, it has too many controls, it's just difficult to learn and master, and it's not intuitive to you, it's going to be a deal breaker and you're likely not going to pursue photography because of that experience. So ease of use and controls is going to be the next most important factor in a beginner's oriented camera. From there, the form factor and the overall size and portability of the camera is actually important when it comes to beginners. A lot of beginners will choose to go with point and shoot, compact, or entry-level mirrorless cameras, and they're doing this because it's not overly large and bulky. In years prior, it used to be entry-level DSLRs, which had comfortable ergonomics, but as a DSLR, these cameras were often too big and bulky to carry around, and for a lot of users that actually becomes a deal breaker. So for you as a beginner, it's important to look for a camera that is portable, that is somewhat pocketable ideally. If not, it's at least easy to carry around. It doesn't take up a lot of storage space in a backpack or a purse or a larger jacket. You don't want it to be overly large because then it's going to be kind of complicated and it's just going to be a little bit inconvenient to use. So size and portability is actually an important quality to consider for a beginner's oriented camera because a lot of people upgrading are upgrading from smartphones, which are highly portable, and they don't want something big and overly complicated to just get better images because you don't have to do it that way. The next factor is going to be affordability. The likelihood that you already have a smartphone, you spent a lot on that smartphone, you may or may not have the budget to invest another $1,500 into a mid-range mirrorless camera or DSLR setup. So you want your beginner's oriented camera to be affordable. Additionally, on that front, you may or may not like photography. It may not be something that you pick up long term. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to invest an arm and a leg up front. So with that, you want to look for a camera that's affordable, that meets your budget, but also gives you a lot of features and value for the money that you're spending, without it being too much that it actually becomes a deal breaker. Affordability is definitely one of those kind of considerations that really ends up becoming a deal breaker between comparing different options. And it's one of those factors that really helps separate one camera between another camera when you're looking. From there, the last consideration that may be important for a beginner's camera is going to be manual controls and advanced functionality that kind of future-proofs the camera, that gives you more of a long-term development with it and gives you more of a long-term value for money that's been spent. Manual controls will allow you to have more creative freedom over the process of capturing great images. These include ISO, shutter, aperture, and adjusting these settings would allow you to have more creative freedom and flexibility over the process of how the camera captures images. On this front as well, it may be important that you find a camera that offers some advanced functionality. These features include HDR, time-lapse, bracketing, multi-exposures, just to name a few. And these features allow you to capture more advanced images such as star trails or long exposures, or maybe focus bracketing for capturing macro shots of plants or insects. But all of these features are bonuses. Not all entry-level and beginners-oriented cameras do offer these features, so they are mostly a bonus. But there are plenty of options that do, and they add more value for the money that's being spent. So now with those out of the way, how does the X-T200 measure up to those standards? First and foremost, the X-T200 provides excellent image quality. On screen right now, I'll show you a gallery of some of the images that I've taken with the X-T200, so that you can confirm for yourself that the image quality is excellent. The images are sharp with excellent dynamic range, fantastic color reproduction, and overall they have a very pleasing natural aesthetic to them. You can also find more detailed information on how it stacks up to Fujifilm's higher end X-Trans sensor if you'd like. A link to that particular sensor demonstration will be linked in the description box down below. But in short, the image quality that this particular camera produces is very much on par with some of the higher end cameras that Fujifilm produces in many respects. It's not exactly identical, as there are some structural differences between these cameras, but overall the image quality that this camera is producing at this price point is excellent, and it's among best in class. The next thing that the Fujifilm X-T200 scores well on is controls, ease of use, and the overall shooting experience with the camera. As you can see on the camera, a lot of the controls are on the right hand side. We've got a command dial here, and we have another command dial right here. We've got our mode dial right here. We've got two customizable function buttons that you can customize as you see fit. And then we've got our D-pad here and our menu and our OK button. There are some other functions on this side as well, our playback and our drive selector. And then we have a customizable my mode dial up here that you can change to control a variety of settings. But overall, the amount of customization that this camera offers, even though it's technically an entry-level mirrorless camera, are very much in line with what you'd find in a intermediate or professional level camera. And the controls are very much excellent. They're well suited for beginners. Hopefully you don't find them a little bit overwhelming, but they are well suited for beginners, and they'll give you plenty of advanced functionality as you progress and as your skill set sharpens. So the X-T200, especially compared to rivals, is doing very well in terms of ergonomics. Very large, comfortable grip here that I can show by detailing here in the light. Very comfortable grip. It has a rear thumb rest as well. Overall, very comfortable ergonomics. The joystick here is not a very common feature in an entry-level mirrorless camera. Dual command dials is also not a common feature amongst other entry-level cameras. They usually have one, and then you have to press another button to control that extra function. And then we have a fully articulating screen, further enhancing the ease of use. The menus are also fully touch enabled, and you can navigate the entire user interface using touch, and it's very intuitive and easy to use. Granted, the menu and the user interface on this camera is a little bit deep. Fuji's done a really great job in organizing the menus across image quality, your autofocusing settings. You have a video and shooting settings, flash, and then you have some main general camera settings. They've done a really great job in organizing that, and the camera does operate really well using the touchscreen, but you will want to take a little bit of time to familiarize yourself with the settings themselves. There are a lot of settings. This camera does have a lot of advanced functions, even though it's right now only $799 USD. It's a very advanced camera at that price point. It has a lot of features features that a lot of its rivals are lacking at this price point. So there are a lot of settings in the menu, so you may want to review the manual on this camera. If you do end up picking it up, there are a lot of advanced functions on this particular camera, but they're well named and they're organized and they're consistently located in the menu. So you won't have any issues once you understand what the functions are doing, and then you can practice and you can play around and you can master those particular functions. But overall, the controls, the ergonomics, and the user interface are all excellent on this camera, and they're well done on Fujifilm's end for an entry-level mirrorless camera. The next thing the Fujifilm X-T200 does well and it scores highly on is its overall portability and form factor. I already detailed the ergonomics of the camera. The ergonomics are excellent, but also if you take off this lens, this is not, there are more compact lenses than this. This is the 16mm 2.8 that I have on right here, but this is the camera by itself. If I had the lens cover on here, it's definitely small enough to fit in a medium-sized jacket pocket. If you're wearing sweatpants, you could probably squeeze this camera into a pair of sweatpants as well. So it's definitely portable. There are a lot of other cameras that have much larger grips and much larger form factors that would not allow you to basically travel in those fashions. It just wouldn't fit in either of those two locations. But the X-T200, given its overall ergonomics and form factor, it's still relatively quite portable. You can definitely, like I said, you can fit this into a large jack pocket, or you can fit this into maybe some cargo pants or some sweatpants if you have a larger pocket, and it will allow you to travel with the camera in that way, and you can have your lens in your other pocket. It's quite portable, it's easy to travel with, it's not very heavy at all, but it has a meaty, substantial feel, so it doesn't feel like it's cheap and plasticky. So overall, the X-T200 performs absolutely brilliantly in terms of portability and form factor. Despite its otherwise compact size, it still maintains excellent controls and ergonomics, like I mentioned previously, and it's still relatively quite portable, so great job on that front as well. The next thing that the X-T200 does well on is that it still remains relatively affordable. It's not the most affordable camera right now at $800 body alone. It is not the most affordable camera. There are definitely other cameras that you can get that are similar enough in terms of image quality and raw functionality that you can probably get at $500 or $350 to $450. You can definitely get a lot of cameras between that price point. Some of those cameras will be second generation or third generation cameras, so you may have to pick up those ones used, but they are available. They're easy to get. You just have to know what to look out for if you're buying a used camera. So as a beginner, we don't really recommend doing that because you don't know what to look out for if this is your first camera. There's definitely some factors you want to consider before buying a used camera. But no, it is possible. If you do want to take that risk, it is absolutely possible. You definitely can get a lot of these features in an older generation camera. That is about half the price of this camera body alone new. So there is that, but there are a number of advanced features that the X-T200 provides at this $800 price point. Namely, it supports time-lapse, HDR, has a digital gimbal function so you can smooth out handshake when recording handheld. It also shoots super slow motion video at 120 frames per second. It also has 4K. It has an optional headphone output using the USB-C adapter that Fujifilm includes with purchase, so you get a microphone and a headphone output. That is a very rare feature. That is really appreciated. That is an excellent feature. Not a lot of the competition offers that feature, so that is that's very sparing to find. That is an excellent find there. But outside of that, it also has a Star Trails mode. It's got a built-in intervalometer, so you can do manual time lapses. It has bracketing, and it has a number of other features. Those are just some of the ones that come to mind right now. But overall, at that price point, it's difficult to find a camera that has all of those features. The only other camera that really comes to mind is maybe a Panasonic G85, G95. Potentially, there's some other Panasonic cameras along that line that would also offer a very similar feature set. Maybe some other Olympus cameras, namely the EM10 Mark IV, has a lot of these features as well. I just recently reviewed the Sony ZV-1, which does have a number of these features. It doesn't have every single one of those features, but at that price point, they're quite similar. It makes up for it in some other areas, but those are some of the cameras that just come to mind. But otherwise, there's not a lot of cameras at this particular price point that are offering all of those features. Quite rare, and it's also quite impressive to see Fujifilm pack all of these really semi-professional and professional level features into an entry-level mirrorless camera that is very much accessible for beginners and gives them a lot of value for money that they're spending. But those are some of the main factors that the Fujifilm X-T200 does well. So with that out of the way, let me give you my final verdict on this camera. I do believe the Fujifilm X-T200 is among one of the top beginners cameras, especially at this price point. Now, whether it's going to be the best beginners camera for you is going to really be dependent on how badly do you want some of the advanced functions that it offers. You can see a full list of those functions in our Fujifilm X-T200 hands-on and detailed written review, and you can also watch the video as well, and you can see all of the features that this camera offers. There are a lot of features. If you're a beginner and you don't know what those features are, you could also find videos on some of those features detailing how to use them. But overall, this camera provides a lot of advanced functionality, even though it's otherwise an entry-level and beginners-oriented mirrorless camera. It's definitely a camera that you could use semi-professional. You could also make it a professional camera as well in many respects as well. There are some differences between this camera and Fuji's higher-end cameras like the XS10, and then from there you can go into the X-T3 and 4 and the X Pro series and soon the XH2, which will be coming out. But there are some differences between these cameras, but fundamentally a lot of the core functionality is latent and it's here in the X-T200 at a fraction of the price point of all of those cameras. Besides the XS10, it's only a $200 difference. It's not a significant difference between those two cameras, but otherwise you're getting a lot of value and bang for your buck for this particular camera. And I would say this is the best camera to get if you're a beginner in Fujifilm's lineup. We haven't reviewed the new XE4. That could also be a contender, but until then, we're going to say, as of right now, the Fujifilm X-T200 is the best entry-level mirrorless camera that you can get in Fuji's lineup. We will take another deep dive at the XA7, and then we'll maybe do an annotation, or I'll let you know in the comments that if that's a better value than X-T200, but my suspicion is that it's not going to be as good as the X-T200. But I will update this video as necessary if that does become the case. But otherwise, I do believe the X-T200, if you're looking at Fujifilm, is an excellent camera for beginners. I've had quite a pleasure shooting with this camera over the last couple months. We will be selling this camera soon and then migrating over into a variety of different brands as we'd like to test and use a lot of different cameras long term. But nonetheless, we have really thoroughly enjoyed shooting with this camera. It's not perfect. The XS10 does fill in a lot of the ergonomic and the handling gaps for me as a more professional oriented photographer, but overall, as a beginners oriented camera, it is excellent. So if you're looking at this particular camera, know that it's an excellent option as a beginners oriented camera. You can find some particular cons on this camera if you do want to know some cons in our written review, and you can also see those in our 3-month follow-up review as well. So there are some cons with this camera, but those cons are very much minimal in the grand scheme, unless you want to go into flash photography, and then it may be some cons there, but otherwise they're minimal in the grand scheme, and this is overall an excellent camera. But that will conclude my thoughts on whether I think the Fujifilm X-T200 is potentially one of the best entry-level mirrorless cameras for beginners. In short, that answer is maybe. I'm not going to say an outright yes. It depends what is important to you. You may not have to spend as much money on this camera if you don't want some of these advanced features, namely the microphone and headphone output combination, time-lapse, bracketing, and so on, the super slow motion video. If you don't really want those features, you don't have to spend this much, so it may not actually be a good camera in those situations. But if you do want some of this advanced functionality, well, it looks like you have a camera to at least consider. But there you have it, my friends. I hope you found this video on the X-T200 insightful and that it added value to you. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or feel like I've overlooked something in the course of this video, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you have any questions or things you'd like to know about the X-T200 and suggestions before we do end up selling this camera, please let me know as well. Also, while you're down in the description box down below, we've launched a new brand called pxpresets.com. PX Presets is going to be your next one and only stop for Lightroom presets until we launch Photoshop and other platform presets. But here you can find both desktop and mobile presets to get you started in a variety of different mediums more powerfully and upgrade your imaging and take your images to the next level. That link to pxpresets.com will be in the description box down below. Please check that out if you're in the market for some exciting Lightroom presets. But until then, I've been your host, Devaun Lennox. I will see you, my friends, in the next video.